I wrote on my blog yesterday about how I came to be writing a memoir, because someone on Twitter that I don't know asked me why I'd written a memoir, and I'd never really sort of thought about that before. And it started because when I came back, in case you haven't read what I've written, when we came back from South Africa in the years that followed, back in this country, I realised that so much had happened, and I would forget it all. I would forget everything that had happened. So it started when I got pneumonia about 5 years after we'd come back, and I couldn't do anything except move my wrist and my hand. And someone got me a pad and a pen, probably one of my lovely daughters, and I wrote pages and pages and pages, and that was the start of it. And then gradually I thought I'd kind of like to turn it into a book. And so the next 20 years passed with me writing bits and pieces here and there, and then joining various writers' groups until in the end I was in Greenacre Writers,
Yay!
which was founded by the two lovely ladies over there, Rosie and Lindsay.
That's fantastic. It's wonderful.
And that was a few years ago, and also I did a master's degree. So and all those things helped, hopefully, to get my writing up to some sort of standard. So anyway, I'm going to read a couple of extracts, and then if I get too embarrassed, I'll get somebody else to play a bit of music so we can all talk again. The book is, well, as you all probably know, set. We arrived there in June '75, and we left there in November '77. And in that time we travelled from Joburg across the Karoo, this 1,000-mile journey to Cape Town. And then we moved house several times. But we arrived in Cape Town with approximately 30 rand left, and no means of, and a baby of course with us, Pascal, and no means in those days of getting any more money. We went there because my husband had an audition in Cape Town, and so we travelled 1,000 miles for his audition in Cape Town. He was an actor, and the first few weeks were very hairy, to say the least, because, well, we arrived with 30 rand, which even in those days there was 2 rand to the pound, wasn't very much. So, and we, anyway, you'll have to read my book to find out what happened next. But I think one of the first things I wrote, one of the first things, one of the early chapters, our first encounters with apartheid, was when we arrived in Joburg, and we got a taxi driver to take us to a hotel, and that was in Hillbrow. And Hillbrow then, and I think it might still be, is one of the most densely populated areas in the world, and very crime-ridden even then, I think. Anyway, we didn't know any of that. We were just completely naive. We were sort of mid-20s, and so we went for a little walk from the hotel to get ourselves some egg and chips, and we went to a cafe. The taxi driver dropped us outside an 8-storey building, bleak and impersonal, in a square surrounded by more high-rise buildings. Waiting at the reception desk to check in, I saw the toilet signs for the first time in both Afrikaans and English. Blanke dames, white ladies. Nie blanke vrouw, non-white females, and was shocked. I nudged Dave, and he looked over too. Bloody hell, he whispered, and we looked at each other. The first time I had to go, I stood outside, hesitating, feeling that by choosing one, I was accepting their distinction. Later, we walked down to a cafe, a short walk from the hotel, where we had our first lunch. The proprietor was a short, fat, bald Afrikaner, and after we'd eaten our omelette and chips, I asked, "Can I use the toilet?" "We don't have." "No toilet?" "Well, only for the black girls." I started to walk towards the door I could see. "Oh, it doesn't matter, I just want a toilet." "No, that one's for the black girls. You can't go there." I looked over his shoulder at the 2 black women working at the sink behind him. One of them glanced sideways at me and turned away. The other kept her head down. They had jobs, did as they were told. For them it was the status quo. The cafe owner's face was set and immovable, and muttering loudly, saying it was bloody ridiculous, we left. We had to walk all the way back to the hotel so I could use the toilet for blanke dames. So, my husband, it's my ex-husband now, but my husband then, Dave, was an actor. He was a very good actor, but one of the reasons we'd left, well, you'd have to read my prologue. There was many reasons. But one of the reasons we'd left was so that he could get into some good English-speaking theatre. And a fantastic opportunity arose after we'd been there a little while, because he bumped into someone he'd known long ago, an actor called Goodman, who was in fact South African, and is quite well known here now. Goodman, he's Jewish. He's often on television, so after a spell with the main Cape Town theatre company, he moved into this other one, which was a mixed race cast, mixed race audience, and the plays were all done under the auspices of St George's Cathedral. St George's Cathedral is like the big central cathedral in Cape Town, and Henry decided, well, Henry and Dave did a couple of plays together, and then Henry decided to do a Dennis Potter play called Son of Man. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a brilliant take on the life of Jesus. Now, the thing with doing the plays in the cathedral, the way they got round the apartheid laws was to have plays with a kind of loosely religious theme. But this was obviously very clearly religious, but not in any conventional sense with Dennis Potter. And Dennis Potter portrayed Jesus as a man, an ordinary man torn and riven with doubt. And it's brilliantly written. So Dave came back one day and said, find it. Henry told me tonight the next show is Son of Man by Dennis Potter, and guess what part he's asked me to read for? I looked blank and asked what it was about. The life of Jesus ending in the crucifixion, but it's different, it's fantastic, and I'm reading for it for Henry tomorrow afternoon. Wow, have you got the script? Let me see. He was flicking through, and I was reading over his shoulder. It was dynamic. I felt delighted that at last he was getting considered for the sort of part he'd always wanted, but also scared. Would he get it? Could he pull it off? We checked it through page by page for the character's dialogue, as we always did. Usually it was a few lines here and a few there, but this part was massive. Jesus was on every page, and in some sections he had pages of monologue. We looked at each other in awe. It was the sort of part he'd always dreamed of and could not have hoped to do in England, where it would have been played by someone well known or famous. I sat down beside him. We read chunks together. In the play, Jesus was not represented as some saintly holy man at all. He was a real human being, riven by self-doubt. He was also an orator who knew how to hold his audience in the palm of his hand, knew how to hold his audience in the palm of his hand while putting across his message. In this extract, he is addressing a large crowd. Jesus, hate your enemy, but love your own kind, your own sort of people, your own crowd. But what? Tell me then, dear, safe, cosy, smug people, what is so extraordinary about holding the hands of your own brothers and sisters, Do you want me to congratulate you for loving those who love you, eh? Eh? Love your enemies. Love your enemies. Yes, I say it again, love your enemies. It's all that's left to us. It's all that can save us. Love, the hardest, toughest, most challenging, most invincible force of all. Love your enemies. Love those who hate you. It was stunning and so powerful. I looked at Dave to see if he was frightened by the magnitude of this part, but his eyes were sparkling. I'm going to get it. His voice was firm. He was relishing the challenge.